let's move on to the next point, which is maths and nature. Okay, so let's just watch this first.
The sequence begins with the numbers 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, and continues indefinitely. Each number is obtained by adding the last two digits together. If we were to take a perfect or golden rectangle, break it down into smaller squares based on Fibonacci's sequence, and divide each with an arc, the patterns begin to take shape. We begin to see Fibonacci's spiral. The spiral in and of itself is insignificant. Its importance is revealed in where we find it. Take, for example, the sunflower. The display of its florets are in perfect spirals of 55, 34, and 21, the sequence of Fibonacci. The fruitlets of the pineapple create the same spiral based on the sequence. The pine cone does the same. As currents move through the ocean and the tide rolls onto the shore, the waves that bring in the tide curve into a spiral that can be mathematically diagrammed onto a plot at the points 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, and 55. Buds on trees, sand dollars, starfish, petals on flowers, and especially the nautilus shell are formed with this exact same blueprint. With each segment of growth, the nautilus adds to itself one more value on Fibonacci's scale. This blueprint can be seen around us on a small scale every day, but the greatest example of all is directly above our heads. At an average of 100,000 light years across, even the spiral of the galaxies above us are formed with the exact design that the tiny shell is formed. This sequence or blueprint appears to be the trademark of a designer.
So over the last 10 years, the golden number or the golden ratio has gained popularity. I think most of us have probably seen similar videos, and a lot of people have tried to sort of emulate that golden ratio in trading to a degree. And there are a lot of Fibonacci traders out there. Now, despite my fascination with the golden ratio, I've never been able to, well, it's not that I've not been able to find a strategy which works. It's more of a case of it just doesn't fit the way that I trade. So I'm not saying it doesn't work. You definitely can do well with Fibonacci type trading using the golden ratio. But the interesting thing for me is that despite me being really, casually interested over the last decade of the golden ratio, there's like a sister type of maths which I've completely been oblivious to. And it's literally only been in the last week that I've discovered what's called the power law. And I'm sat there thinking, how am I such an idiot? How have I not seen this power law before? Even though I've studied statistics, I do trading, I'm aware of the golden ratio. And the last week has just been absolutely mind-blowing for me. And it's not often that my mind is blown from a new discovery of some sort. But what do animals, DNA, astronomy, cities, markets, terrorist attacks, nature, and Bitcoin all have in common? These are completely unrelated things, or markets and Bitcoin, I guess, are similar, but and the list is endless. And in a world which seems completely coincidental, there is actually order. Now, a lot of people have used the golden ratio examples and also the power law to think this is God. Is it God or is it just maths? Simulation theorists will be like, well, that's just code because we're in a simulation. And therefore, if we are in a simulation, there will be some sort of mathematical code which builds a universe of some sort. I'm not in either camp. I'm just gonna say I'm not in either camp. I don't think it's God. I don't think simulation is a creator of some sort. But so putting all that sort of aside, I just find it absolutely fascinating that there is here's the key thing, a predictive universal mathematical construct that applies to all networks. And that's the key thing. there are very few things in science which are predictive. So this is why physics is the king science, and all the other sciences are lesser sciences. Now, oh, that's quite a statement. But basically, physics is one of the only sciences that really comes up with predictive models. So they come up with a mathematical construct of some sort and go, oh, okay, so if this works, this should be able to predict yada, yada, yada. And guess what? A lot of physics models and constructs do. Whereas you don't really get that in biology and chemistry and all that sort of stuff. And so what the power law is a predictive universal mathematical construct that only applies to networks. And guess what? The universe is basically a massive network. So Kepler first stumbled across this. So Kepler in the early 1600s was fascinated with the celestial bodies, and he thought there was some sort of relationship with the planets in our solar system. And by the way, in the early 1600s, he wasn't aware of all the planets in our solar system. He was aware of a bunch of them, but not all of them. And by the way, this was before Newton, so they weren't aware of gravity as we know it, and the Newtonian laws of physics and all that sort of stuff. He just saw a relationship, looking through his telescope, of the stars and planets. And what he found is like, oh, what if I try and plot the radius of each planet's orbit around the sun? I mean, back in the early 1600s, I mean, if you gave me a telescope, I wouldn't have a freaking clue. But he did this hundreds of years ago. And the funny thing is, when you plot them on a random chart, it all looks completely random, until he came up with the idea of a log-log plot. So when I look at a logarithmic chart on Bitcoin, what do we normally do? We log the price axis, and we have normal time. But what you rarely ever see in the everyday world is only really in physics. For physicists, a log-log plot is like normal, because you need to have a log plot of time and also whatever unit you're doing. Because physicists are looking at the stars, so they're dealing with vast numbers. So you can't have one log and one linear, because it would just be a ridiculous chart. So they're always looking in log-log plots. Or when you put a log-log plot of the orbits around the sun, guess what? The planets all align in a straight line on a log-log plot. And so this became a predictive model, and guess what? When they discovered new planets, they're like, I wonder if this fits on the line. Yes, it does. And when we discovered other bodies outside, well, within our solar system, but microplanets or sort of protoplanets and whatnot, like Pluto, Sedna, Eris, they're all on this same line. Because by the way, there are lots of bodies out there the size of our moon, pretty much. I mean, to put it in perspective, our moon is bigger than Pluto. And when you look at Sedna and Eris and what was the other few, they're all on this same line. And it's not just space stuff, it's everything. So the real pioneer was a guy called Geoffrey West. And I've watched a lot of Geoffrey West videos now. The one that I should recommend is his TED Talk speech 12 years ago. Amazing. So this guy is the bull's knees. Bull's knees? Bees balls. Bee's knees. This guy is the bee's knees. He's a theoretical physicist. He spent a long time at Los Alamos, which is a sort of a sneaky beaky science research place in America. They're doing high energy particle physics. He became the president of the Santa Fe Institute, and he spent his whole life studying the power law. So this guy knows his stuff. And what he found was that he was like, in his 50s, apparently he's from a very short-lived male lineage. His dad lived into his late 50s, his granddad was in his 50s, and so when he turned 50, he realized, shit, I'm almost dead. And then he turned his physics and science thinking in like a why do we age? What makes us age, you know? And then he basically went all in on biology, trying to hack it, you know. Well, he's a lot older now, so he managed to do something right. But and so what he found was that the power law applies to animals as well. So one of the things he got into was what is the resting metabolic rate of an animal compared to its mass. So, and he found that when you look at the power law, there's two ways to look at the power law. You can look at it like this chart here, or if you do it in an ascending order, it's a straight line up. So what he found that in animals, regardless of the mass, there is what's called a sublinear scaling. Okay, so he was saying that if you told him the mass of any animal, he could then, using his model, predict the resting metabolic the metabolic rate of the animal, the breathing speed, the heart rate of the animal, the speed of the blood circulation around that animal, to how long it sleeps. Like, all he needs to know is his mass. So he took his predictive physics models into basically nature and realized, holy shit, it applies to everything. And so what he found is that if you had an animal which was say 20 grams, it would have the same metabolic rate as an animal twice its mass, roughly, on the same scale. But yeah, so basically when you plot the chart, it looks like this. So every animal under the planet is basically following the power law, even the blue whale. And that is despite millions of years of different evolutionary tracks. So, the blue whales originated from a deer. I don't know if you know that. The blue whale used to be a deer in the dinosaur times. Then this deer went towards the coast, then had webbed feet, then turned into like a semi-amphibian mammal, and then basically just turned into a whale. Over millions of years, obviously. But it's not just mammals. And so he found it with all different types of animals, from reptiles, and they all have different slopes of the power law. But the same rule applies. If you give a scientist or him the mass of an animal, he'll tell you pretty much everything else about that animal. And so there's two types of scaling with the power law. You have a thing called sublinear scaling and superlinear scaling. So the reason, so if we go back a few, the power law with animals is what's called sublinear scaling. So you would have thought that if you double the mass of an animal, you would also double the metabolic rate of the animal as well. You think, you've got double the amount of cells, surely the metabolic rate is going to be double or even more. It's not the case. And he was saying that he's fascinated by the number 4 or the quartering. So with sublinear scaling, there is what's called there's efficiencies of scale. So if you double the mass of an animal, the metabolic rate only increases by 0.75, so 75%. And because of that, all animals fit on this. So you double the mass of everything, the metabolic rate only increases 75%. And so he was also one of the people that proved that there is a certain limit to how big animals can get. Because if you double the mass of an animal, like if you took King Kong, for example, and took the mass of if King Kong existed, what would be the resting metabolic rate of King Kong? Then you'd come up with a number of calories per second to live. And then it's like, okay, how much food in the environment is there to sustain an animal that size? And obviously it just doesn't compute. But millions of years ago, we had dinosaurs which were freaking huge. Why? Because the leaves were about 10 times bigger. There's more fauna back in the prehistoric times. There was a lot more calories to be eaten in terms of vegetation than there is now. Hence, you could have a lot of these bigger animals. He goes down the rabbit hole. I've watched hours just on animals. So that's sublinear scaling. So you then have a thing called superlinear scaling. Now, this is where you see things in sort of, again, it's still the power law, but you have, hello. Please grab a seat. There's chairs and just grab a chair and then sit somewhere. This is not going to make any sense. Anyway. So superlinear scaling is more the sort of the scaling that you see in networks. Now, an animal is still a network, right? We have a brain with a neural net of some sort. There's a network within our head. Our nervous system is a network. So all animals are, I guess, the accumulation of a network. But when you have a pure network in itself, typically you see super linear scaling. So it's not the case of, if you double the size, you have slightly less metabolic rate. With super linear scaling, you have that quarter that he was on about is on the other way. So typically, if you let's take a city, because he was also fascinated by cities. If you increase the size of a city, if you double the size of a city, you get a 15% increase compared to the previous size, if that makes sense. But the problem with super linear scaling is that in the real world, exponential growth like this, it doesn't last forever, so it always tails off. Like all of us experienced super linear scaling as an embryo. We were born and then we plateaued in our growth. Companies are the same thing, stocks, technologies. So you have these two power law growths, right? And so he was fascinated with, okay, what's the difference between a forest and a city? Like, you could bomb a city, you could put a nuke on a city, 30 years later it's still there. So how do forests disappear? But cities are like, you can't get rid of cities, pretty much. I mean, we've got real proof of that. Nagasaki and Hiroshima, they're still there, even though we glassed it. We didn't glass it, but yeah. Sorry? Yeah. So, and over the last 20 years, one of the biggest exponentials that the globe has seen are cities. So over the last 20 years, 1 million people a week have flocked to a city. 1 million people a week. And it's still growing. That's an exponential curve in itself. That's a power law curve in itself. And the reason people go to cities is for all of the prosperity that they aim to achieve. I want to get a better job. I want to earn more. I want to be closer to things. I want to have a more hustle-bustle life, etc. But again, there are other charts that show people go to cities and then they bugger off when they get a bit older. China have been building 300 new cities over the last 20 years. It's exponential. So what is the difference between this and scientists know pretty much everything there is about a forest with the trees, the leaves, to this, whereas scientists don't know as much about cities. Geoffrey West came along and went, I bet the power law applies here. And guess what? He was spot on. So he found that every metric you could think of with terms of humans and cities applies, humans and the power law applies to cities, from the population and wages. If you look at the density of cities across the whole of the world, they all are on the same power law chart. If you took the length of the roads in each city, they're all of the same power law curve or straight line. If you look at the amount of petrol stations per city, you scale double the city, you'll be able to predict how many petrol stations there will be regardless of the size of the city. If you look at people in terms of rank of the cities, it's the same power law. Even to the breakdown in the types of professions in each city. So you could look at New York and go, all right, this is the subsection of all the different jobs there. Go to any other city, it's going to be exactly the same. Across the world, not just the US. If you look at the walking speeds in cities, it's exactly the same thing. Bigger the city, the faster the walk. I mean, you walk around Norwich, look at the speed, go to London, look at the speed. Go to some village, go to Elsham, I don't know. It's all of this, it's all the power law. And so basically when you put in crime, GDP, income, patents per city, the IQ distribution per city, it's all on the same power law. So obviously me being a golden ratio fan, this week has been like, holy shit, how have I not known about the power law all these years? And so if you double the size of a city, you systematically increase everything by 15%. Everything. You improve prosperity 15%, but you also increase the amount of crime. So from income, wealth, disease, crime, and with crime, you also increase the amount of police men and women. Innovation, increase the amount of, ambulances and fire stations, civil servants, waste, and patents, and it's endless. Pick a metric, it will be on the power law, and you can predict it. And there's this efficiency of scaling here that you double the size of the city, you increase whatever metric you're looking by 15%. So that's superlinear scaling, but with sublinear scaling, it's sort of a reduction of a quarter, roughly. So the problem with again, this is a slide from his TED talk. The problem with superlinear scaling is that in order to maintain that exponential growth curve, if you look like Moore's law, for example, with transistor sizes, you have to have major innovations in order to bypass that plateauing, because that plateau basically symbolizes death of whatever you're measuring, whether it's a company or a stock, etc. So you have to have a massive innovation in order to maintain that superlinear growth. If you look at cities, they've done that. You go from horses to cars to electricity, like cities over the last couple. By the way, 200 years is really how old a city really is, like a proper city. It's an invention, believe it or not. A city is an invention, and they've had innovations over time. And so, but the problem is, the higher you get up this curve, the faster you have to innovate. And again, the Moore's law is a prime example. You cannot measure Moore's law with the same way they measured it 50 years ago. They've come up with new ways to increase compute cycles. So when you go to Wikipedia basically and type in Power Law and read about it, it basically says everything. And like even things like the size of craters on the moon and solar flares and cloud size, everything reaches the power, it is in the Power Law. The craziest thing is language. So if you take the top 10 words that are used in the English language, the is the most used word in the English language. But guess what? All of these words in every language under the sun that has ever been made, including English, follows this curve. So let's say the is up here. The second most used word in any language follows this curve. Then the third word, then the fourth, then the fifth, then the sixth, etc. To the point where they've used the Power Law to go to old languages like old Egyptian or old Sanskrit languages, which they haven't fully decoded, and went, Power Law, okay, so this word must be. So there's so many things the Power Law has been used for and can be used for, and it will be used for things that we haven't encountered yet. It's amazing, right? Language. So the thing that, it's everything. So we have, AI, neural nets, machine learning, astronomy, physics. Basically anything that has any inkling of a network will experience the Power Law in some way or another. Anything with a network. Even crazy things like earthquakes. So the scale and size of an earthquake and the frequency of an earthquake to terrorist attacks and also wars. If you look at the amount of deaths on a terrorist attack, again, it's the same thing. So to this day, 9/11, I think, has killed the most amount in a terrorist attack. It's about 3,500 people. So if you put that up here, if you take the next biggest terrorist attack, it's roughly a tenth of that. It's 300 people down here. And then you go to the third biggest, it follows that same curve. Everything follows it. And then 6 years ago, another physicist came along and went, can't we do this with Bitcoin? And this guy was called Giovanni Santostasi. So he's based in San Diego. He was an astronomer, or an astrophysicist, sorry, not like me for saying astronomer. And his research areas were computational neuroscience, neural networks, and biophysics. So he's now the chief science CSO of a sleeping company. So it's a bit different. But he got into Bitcoin in 2018, 2019, and thought, let's put the Power Law. No one's ever plotted Bitcoin on a log-log plot. He did. And when he plotted Bitcoin on a log-log plot, it looked like this. Now, the interesting thing that you have to understand with science is that when you look at the regression of a chart, so basically what happens is when you have a chart, can you put a line through it? And how close does the plot fit the line? Does that make sense? That's called regression. That's linear regression. And linear regression will come up with so r squared, it comes up with 0.92. So what this means is that this straight line here matches the Bitcoin price 92.1%. Now, in physics terms, no physicist will ever publish a paper unless their new model is over 90%. To the point where if a physicist has a model or some sort of idea and it's only 85% accurate or has a regression of 0.85, that's considered garbage. Like, they wouldn't risk their reputation putting something out there which less than 0.9 r squared. And he was saying, and I've watched a lot of Giovanni videos, and he was saying that he's coming from the astrophysics world, and he's now, guess what, in the biotech world, dealing with, and he was absolutely flabbergasted that in biology and the med world, that people are publishing stuff at 0.7 r squared regression. Like in medicine, it's like 70%, 80%, yeah, let's get that drug out. And he was like, this is crazy. But he said he literally fell off his seat when he saw that the Bitcoin price followed the power law, 92%. And when he did this, and he's done it from days of Genesis block, so when it started. But at the time he did that, there was only so many data points. And he said that when you have more data points, the model gets stronger. Guess what? Right now it's 0.95. So over the last 5 or 6 years, we've had more data plots to the point where the linear regression, that straight line matches the Bitcoin price 95%. So yeah, so this is the more up-to-date one. Yeah, R squared is 0.953. So this is not a bunching up of time. It's simply just plotting time on a log basis. Same with price. And he's created his own rainbows. These little dots here are the halvings. But basically, you can get rid of, so with a lot of Bitcoin models and a lot of forecasting models that you probably see on YouTube and stuff, there's a lot of variables that you have to consider. And a lot of variables can change. And he was saying that with the power law, fuck variables, just look at the power law. Done. Every variable is considered with the power law. So you can extrapolate where the price is going to go, which is what you can probably see why I'm so excited about the power law. Now, obviously, at the same time, so Giovanni posted this on Reddit, or I think it was probably Reddit, when he said, hey, this is the power law, Bitcoin follows it, which is weird. Some other guy, very quickly after that, also posted it. And basically this guy, Harold Berger, basically just put a bit more work into the power law with Bitcoin. Because Giovanni, he did the power law of Bitcoin and then just got on with his job. He was like, and just moved on. So someone else came along and went, okay, well, can we just extrapolate it a bit? And this is what you get, all the way up to 2041. So obviously I've done the hard work for you for converting these silly numbers into numbers that we understand. So where we are right now, so this chart predicted that at the beginning of 2024, the price would be 31,622. Obviously, the price obviously changes a lot, right? But you can see that Bitcoin spends half the time in each of the two bands. But as a predictive model, it's not far off. So by the way, this chart was made in 2019, and he was saying that, you know, at some point in 2024, it's going to be between these two bands. And also, so I've just done by the mean, okay? It also means by the turn of 2020, so December 2025, which is my bang out time, Bitcoin should be 100K if it was on the mean. Obviously, we see that we have mean reversion here. It goes way and then all the way back down. So in December 2025, it could be anywhere, you know, in the red zone, most likely. So north of 100K, that's interesting. And then where's the million mark? Because that's everyone wants to know. So that mean level, we hit 1 million in 2033, summer 2033, $1 million Bitcoin, with a mathematical accuracy of 95%. That's incredible, right? Plus or minus, a degree. Just like the price oscillates within these two bands, you have a mathematical, scientific guarantee, or not guarantee, but probability of 95%, which in science terms is pretty freaking spot on, that we're going to see roughly $1 million Bitcoin in the early 2030s.
And then the average house price will be about 20 million.
Yeah. I know, exactly. Yep.
Obviously, like where it touches the top band.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen, I think Ben Cohen do some analysis on that with on YouTube. He's got 5 bands. I'll find it.
I won't even watch it.
Yeah. So it's always going to touch the top of that top band.
Not always. No.
The way that's measured, then.
I wouldn't say always. There's a high probability.
That band's created from the data set, isn't it? So
yeah.
There has to be an edge somewhere.
Yeah. And as you can see, it narrows as time goes on. But here's the other crazy thing. We see $10 million Bitcoin in 2041. So talk about a pension. Annie needs no, nothing. You need to give her a Bitcoin, mate. But how incredible is that, right? That we are, there's a pretty freaking high probability that we'll see $1 million Bitcoin in the early 2030s and $10 million Bitcoin just 10 years after that. So here is another chart. So this is a live, I'll have to put the link into Telegram, but this is an interactive chart that you can move around. Yes?
Sorry, all of that, just like looking at roughly, that assumes no major detrimental government.
No, it's irrelevant. The power law takes into all variables. It doesn't give a shit. The power law, when you look at nature and the world and everything, we've had all sorts of cataclysmic extinction events. It doesn't change stuff. In fact,
if it's outlawed, for instance, if governments say it is illegal to hold crypto assets.
just like alcohol was. Alcohol was banned. So temporary human constructs like law are temporary in the grand scheme of things. And you can't globally ban anything. What is the most banned drug on the planet? Probably heroin or cocaine. What's one of the biggest booming industries in the world? Heroin and cocaine. Like, if you ban it, there'll be an underworld, a Bitcoin underworld. And I'll happily be part of that underworld. Shit, this is on camera. I always abide by the law. So, yes.
Does that exist for any other crypto, or only because there's not enough data points for others? Or?
So here's a cool thing. I've been chatting with Giovanni a lot this week. And he's agreed to be interviewed by us lot on this Wednesday coming at 6 o'clock. He lives in San Diego. So 10 o'clock his time, 1800 our time on Wednesday, we're going to jump on Zoom. So feel free to jump on and interrogate him. So you've heard the bastardized version of all of this. Now you can hear it from an actual scientist. Okay? Because all I am right now, I'm just an information relayer trying to distill it through my idiot brain into idiot speak, how I understand it. You can get it from the horse's mouth on Wednesday. I'll put it in Telegram. I wanted to fly him over, but then he was like, San Diego. I was like, let's do Zoom. Don't tell him that. Yeah, so there's this chart, again, Bitbo, I'll have to post the link. This is an interactive one. You can move around and instead of, and it puts it in proper prices, so you can hover your mouse and go, where's it going to be? But same chart. Where did I hover my mouse? Over here. Yeah, December 2025, I hovered my mouse over. So it's saying it's going to set a low of 50K, a high of 500, and a mean of 139K. So when you're being really accurate. Because obviously with this, when I was using my big fat ruler and stuff, it's hard to get an exact number. But on this chart, yeah. But the crazy thing is, I find it quite interesting that, so here, when you look at this line doesn't always hit, if you can see. So whereas this line, it should have, you remember I was one of the people that said 100K Bitcoin? Well, that's because I was looking at all these online metrics on-chain analytics saying, oh yeah, and that's why I said it won't necessarily hit the line. But 139K as the mean. Well, what has my top Bitcoin target been?
35, was it?
Ah, not too far off. So obviously my model is me being a basic person with trading view, but I've built this model based on what I think the potential Bitcoin market cap will be and the percentage of Bitcoin at that time. So, and basically based on all these cycles. Now, if we go to that BitBo chart, which is a bit more accurate. Oh yeah, so this is what Giovanni came up with. He said that with the power law, because obviously recently he spent a bit more time, now I think he's a bit more money orientated. Because in fact, he's trying to set up a Bitcoin fund as we speak. No, he's trying to set up a fund right now. So he's seen what Michael Saylor has done and set up, he had a company, he's basically borrowing money through his company to buy Bitcoin. Giovanni is now trying to set up a Bitcoin fund because he's got 1 million charts. Basically, he says that proves Bitcoin's going to double over a certain, or 10x over a certain period of time, all that sort of stuff. So he's trying to use his maths and his findings to raise a shitload of money. So he found that there is a sinusoidal wave with Bitcoin. So not only does it follow the power law, there is a sine wave with this power law, and Bitcoin follows this sine wave on the power law. So this doesn't look like a normal sine wave, but this is because it's on a log-log plot, and it looks like this. So guess what happens? On this chart, according to Giovanni's sine wave on this log-log plot, what date is that again? Jesus Christ. Yeah, December 2025. 125K. So even Giovanni's saying that Bitcoin is not going to be $500,000 by this cycle, which is what the whole of the Twitter is saying. And that's why I say I can't see Bitcoin being more than 150K this cycle. And now the power law says so. So this is now my new god, power law. And when you extend the power law into not just a straight line, but if you wanted the equivalent of a rainbow sort of chart, this is what it looks like. And that this sine and the sine wave, this black stuff, is what he's predicted that will happen in the future. And price has pretty much followed it. Look, we had a double top, sort of a fake high and another high. His model's been pretty spot on. So if this is to be the case, we've got this next halving right now, and again, yeah, we've seen that price. But like looking over here at 2033, we're 10 to the 6, that's 1 million. So, 2034, Giovanni says, $1 million Bitcoin.
Has he done it out to when the last Bitcoin?
It goes to 100 million. Yeah, it's a never-ending thing. So, but that's not the best bit. There's more. So he has promised to try and do the power law for Kaz and Tau. I've asked him, and he says, as a gesture of goodwill, thanking me for inviting him to chat with us, he'll do it for Kaz and Tau. But he says he's highly dubious. He's plotted the power law for gold, silver, the S&P 500, and a whole bunch of other stocks. They don't fit. So the price of the S&P 500, the price of gold and silver and Apple, they don't fit the power law. And you can show, we can see that he'll show us the charts. I've seen them, and I'm like, that's interesting. But the growth, the internal growth within these companies is in the power law. So if you look at the amount of employees, the amount of HR managers per employee, all of that sort of stuff, because it's a network. A company is just a mini network, isn't it? And a bunch of companies is a bigger network. That's why the stock market has many power law metrics, but the price of the S&P 500 doesn't follow the power law. So when I asked about Tau and Tau and CAS, he was like, "I'll do it, but I'm hoping CAS," because CAS is very similar to Bitcoin.
Has he done Ethereum?
No. So
Very interesting.
I know, and I want to, because that's not the best bit. Because in my rabbit hole down with power laws, it's anything that is a network. So this is the price of Ethereum. It's funny you talk about Ethereum. I was thinking, wait a minute, crypto is a network, Bitcoin is a network, but Ethereum is a network on a network. And Ethereum did 79,000% in 4 years. And, you know, Ethereum grew ridiculously because it was a network on a network. So what other crypto is a network within a network within a network? This is network inception here. BitTensor. Come on, Tau. So that's what BitTensor is. It's a network within a network within a network. So I'm very excited about the power laws, and you're going to be so bored over the next 2 years of those two words, power law, and Geoffrey West. I've got a bit of a man crush on Geoffrey West in a non-sexual way. Don't calm down. And in an intellectual way.